Sorry I can't be with you here today, but unfortunately I've had a bereavement in the family. So um, anyway, I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and I hope you have a great session today. My name is Professor Martin Charter from UCA in the UK, and I'm going to give you a bit of an overview around circular business models, circular design related uh, to fishing gear, and this builds on a project we're involved in, two projects we've been involved in around the area. So as in Google Trends, we see circular economy as a term increasingly used in search engines over the last 8 or so years. And really circular economy, it is the essence of circular economy is looking at the sort of biosystem and the technical system. And as we know, really over the last sort of 40, 50 years, fishing gear has moved very much towards the technical system and polymers. But there are broader issues emerging with ocean marine plastics. We may see more innovation in the area. So if we're going to move or we're going to transition to the circular economy, we need to design for the circular economy. And 80% of a product's environmental impact is determined at the design and development stage. So in the design and development and assembly of fishing gear, that design stage is very important. But to me, what designing for a circular economy is very much about maximizing the value in products, components, and materials for as long as possible in the economic and social systems. So it's about value retention, value maximization, and it isn't about waste. So it's really about an extended life cycle perspective, and really much more of a focus on the use phase, getting material back, revalorizing it, if you like, and then getting it back out into a second or nth life. What we've seen emerge is various policies worldwide, and particularly in Europe, we had the Circular Economy Action Plan 1.0 in December 2015. We recently had a second circular economy action plan, but this particular one set in place a variety of initiatives, particularly of note is on plastics. And we saw the emergence of the Single-Use Plastics Directive in 2019, and within that there were proposals for an extended producer responsibility scheme for fishing gear across the 27 countries of Europe. So effectively for gear manufacturers, assemblers to take back and recycle nets. And that is presently in development and will move forward. What we've also seen is the coming out of the European standardization system, ANAS-CEN, is the development of a standard guidance standard on the circular design of fishing gear, and this process will start next year. On a broader level, we have ISO TC 323, which is a technical committee within ISO that is charged with developing standards across the area of circular economy. And we have 4 in development at the moment, one covering terms and definitions and a framework, a second one on business models, a third one on measurement and metrics, and a fourth one providing guidance through case studies. And I'm involved in that, so I'm aware of the complexity of this. So getting back to the issue of fishing gear, well, we have a design problem. We still have extensive waste in the area, with a lot of materials going to landfill, particularly ethylene and polypropylene, and we also have fishing gear going into the sea. And the estimates are between 10 and 70% of ocean marine plastics are fishing gear, and the European Commission have gone for around about 28-30% as their focus. But this again is an area that needs a lot more research, and organisations like the Global Ghost Gear Initiative are trying to penetrate the data here. So the idea is to move from that waste system to a much more value-based system, where we organise the materials in materials banks, and we extend the value in those materials. We looked at this in a product in a report, looking at the whole idea of circular business models and circular design, and this was published in May and then revised in July, and this is available from our website. So, fin and shellfish. Often people think of fin fish only, but there's also thinking about fishing gear for fin fish and shellfish. And coming out of our report, we found there was a number of issues that were of a particular importance, particularly in the design and development of the fishing gear. Essentially, the gear has to be fit for purpose, and it has to perform its function to catch fish. There's a lot of concern from the fishermen, in effect, about the costs of the nets. So any fishing gear has to be cost effective. It has to be durable and long life. And presently, the vast majority of fishing gear is made of polymers, but it also includes a whole range of other materials. And Plastics Global quoted that they found through their recycling efforts there are 700 combinations and permutations of materials used in fishing gear. So they're quite complex products, include metals, cork, etc., etc. So another key issue is customization. What we found was a lot of the fishing gear is customized to the needs of the fishermen. So the fishing gear producers work closely with the gear manufacturers. But what we found is a lot of the product life extension is undertaken directly by the fishermen themselves, so actually in the use phase. Other key issues are, particularly if we're going to move towards more circular fishing gear, is the how one engages with the supply chain on these issues. That is often in Asia. And another key issue is recognizing there are different failure modes, different reasons why products come in effect to the end of the first life. So again, as mentioned before, what we found that there is a substantial amount of repair and modification going on within the fishermen, in the sense they're wanting to sweat their assets. The fishing gear costs a lot of money, so they want to keep that material going. One of the issues, however, that we did find is that in the repair process or the modification, that often different types of twine are used to repair the net that aren't necessarily consistent with the original material. So this can create a problem at the end of the first or second life, third life, whatever. And what we found was that there are some closed loop models out there where fishing gear manufacturers and assemblers are offering to take back and repair products and resell either direct or within a service contract. But also in the open loop, there is fishing gear sort of in the market that is then being reutilized in other forms, still quite small scale. And a report that we completed a couple of years ago now that we're updating indicating that there was maybe about 30 commercial products that we found worldwide that are derived from fishing gear in another form. However, I believe that is now growing. So those types of products would break down into a couple of areas. So there'll be reuse products. So this is Verdura, who reuse nets into shoes, and these shoes selling for €2 to €250. So as a designer and an entrepreneur, and there is again, this is reutilizing the ropes for, in effect, jewelry for necklaces, etc. It's a German company. And then something I called regen, which is the use of chemical recycling to regenerate nylon from fishing gear. And we have a company called Aquafil who developed a brand called EcoNile. They use a de- and repolymerization process to produce fibers from the fishing gear that is going into clothing, that is going into carpets, etc. And then we also have mechanical recycling, and particularly of note is Plastics Global, but there are a few small players emerging who use mechanical recycling to produce pellets for injection molding into products. And perhaps one of the best examples is Burio, who are a Chilean US company who have their own process where they work closely with the fishermen, and they have a factory in Santiago where by they utilize pellets in injection molding into skateboards and other products. They've tried to aim for 100% utilization of material for the fishing gear, but effectively they had to include rubber in the product because if you drop the skateboard, it would break. So there are constraints in product development there, but they're effectively taking products forward from fishing gear. There's also companies who've been experimenting with 3D printing using filament from fishing gear. And we have one company in Cornwall in the UK called Fishy Filaments, and their business is not to produce 3D printed products, but produce the filaments for 3D printing. And these are coming from, I believe, Second Life nylon. So there's a range of different opportunities to start to more fully utilize fishing gear in the open loop into other products. And also in summary, if you are a fishing gear producer and assembler, one area to look at is maybe your business model. So your company approach, your organization approach to deliver value to customers and other stakeholders. And in composing business models, there are various elements to this. Much easier to create, for example, a more circular business model if you are a small company or a startup. More difficult if you have embedded systems and larger. But you might want to think about, models that are producing, nets on demand, pure customization. Much better use of materials, much more efficient, production. Various product life extension models, and services. So, like the Verdura example, reutilizing the fishing gear into fibers for clothing, etc. But one also might look at the whole services around product life extension, from maintenance, for servicing, cleaning, etc. One also might think about remanufacturing models. So if you're a producer assembler, could you modularly design your nets in or gear in a modular fashion, that the end of first life, if part of the net gets torn or ripped, you can remove that section and replace it, so the net goes back to the factory, and then elements of the net are you know removed, and new modules in that sense are incorporated. So that requires a whole company, but also a new design system. And there are many models for remanufacturing in other sectors. Could you look at a model that is more based on the functional, providing the function directly to the customer? So selling the service rather than the physical product. So selling, for example, maybe the service of fishing gear is to, develop a maximum, capture of fin or shellfish. So how can you deliver a service, to fulfill that function? And that may be a service through a service contract like rental or leasing, or it may be, paying for the use of the net in some form. And this can become much more customer orientated and potentially more resource efficient. And also come and look at collaborative models. So maybe, in the fishing sector, there are cooperatives and other social enterprises. So, is there an approach whereby, the fishermen could share and more fully utilize nets, if they're not fishing at the same time? So another key element to think about if we're going to try and move towards or transition towards a more circular approach to fishing gear is to look at the whole innovation system around port cities, of which there are various stakeholders. And one of the areas that we've been looking at and developing some demonstrations is the idea of bringing together the innovation subsystems in ports and the fishing subsystems. So these are the role players, who are involved in innovation in cities or port cities, and those that are involved in fishing gear. We developed a methodology to look at that. And so the idea is then to start to bring those groups together to create, new innovation, because what we found is that those groups really don't talk to one another. The fishing system is also very separate, and even slightly separate from the port, outside of the main part of the port city. So we've run workshops bringing together and utilising this methodology in Ålesund in Norway and in Galway in Ireland. And surprise, surprise, when we ran these workshops, they were pretty well attended, and it was for the first time that many people had met, and what we started to identify, particularly in Ireland, is that there were gaps in the value chain. So in the idea of taking, the waste fishing gear to products, there were gaps in terms of role players that needed to be filled. So as part of our thinking, conceptually, we've come up with this idea of the BCE lab. This might be is a physical building, that might exist in a port city area that brings a lot of this thinking together. And really, it really starts to tackle the whole idea of the different elements of the value chain, from the collection of materials, the sorting, the process of shredding, cleaning, etc., grinding, washing, then the manufacture from that material, or assembly, reuse through to product. So that whole value chain. So this BCE lab would coordinate this. And there would be 4 modules within the BCE lab. And this might be one physical building, it might be 4 buildings, or even there was some discussion in a region. And there would be different functions here. There'll be a design lab that's, is coming up with ideas from products from the fishing gear. There'll be a processing lab that deals with the processing, from the cleaning through to the grinding, etc. Pelletization, or filament production, or just cleaning for reuse. A manufacturing section, that produce and assemble the products, and a startup lab for companies who produce products from the waste fishing gear, or end of first life fishing gear, or second. And so there'll be 4 components. So again, they might be in one place, but they might be separated. And often, as you find, as you generate ideas, in life, no ideas are new. So we found in Sontanus, in the southwest of Sweden, there is already some experimentation going on in that area, looking at industrial symbiosis around the fishing sector, and they've started to look at, could they create products from the recycling of waste fishing gear, and similar to what we are thinking about. So it's already starting to happen there. So thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a good conference. So again, it's thinking about value and not waste. How can we maximize the value of the materials and components in waste fishing gear? So thank you very much, and have a good event.